Today with me is my dear old friend Günther Dobrauz-Saldapenna, a legend in the tech space. How is it possible that a person in one life can do so many things?
The honest answer is a lot of luck and a lot of hard work. I always had this dream of doing something great, and usually it is linked to technology.
You wrote this book, Uptake Revisited. The logic was that companies, when they're incumbents, don't understand what will disrupt them.
There I rightly brought together all of those models, the S-curves and even the Harvard bell curve, and over the next books I got to develop them even further. The world changes in a way we've never seen before. Exponential technologies where it comes down to more than one that you need to combine. So it's not about only blockchain, but if you say blockchain and AI, this is where it becomes really interesting. I don't know if you're referring to a certain actor. He invested directly in Genève, Leonardo DiCaprio, yes. Two friends of mine and me, we started exelixis together. The three areas that we all agreed on that we want to put some money behind.
Let's talk about tech. Let's talk about tech. Let's talk about tech.
Hello and welcome to Let's Talk About Tech, your podcast on venture capital and private equity, brought to you by Venionaire Capital, the entrepreneurial partners. Today with me is my dear old friend Günther Dobrauz-Saldapenna, a legend in the tech space. Originally Austrian, now Swiss. You had been early stage investor, you had been a lawyer, you have had a fantastic career with very different shades of the legal environment. Now you're back to the family business with the family office, and we will speak about longevity, circular economy, blockchain economy, and whatnot. How is it possible that a person in one life can do so many things? Tell us a bit about your journey.
Well, first of all, thank you. It's great to be here because we've been friends for many, many years. I think it's close to 20 years now. And it's always been fascinating, meeting you and speaking with you. So I think you're, in a very charming way, summarized half of my life. I don't really know how to add a lot to that, but I think the honest answer is a lot of luck and a lot of hard work, right? So you're trying to follow your dreams, try to make them come true. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, and this is what at the end gives you that kind of life.
Where did the journey start? In the back of my head, I know you started an accelerator venture fund attached to a Swiss university. Is that right?
Almost. I think if I really have to break it down, it would probably start one step before that, which was in Austria, right? And I always had this dream of doing something great, and usually it is linked to technology. And I think it was in the late 90s when I discovered venture capital as a term. And I read one or two books about it. And then when I did the doctorate of my law studies, there was not focusing exactly on venture capital, but of some of the structures and so forth. And then the idea came up, I want to become a venture capital guy. And back in the days, there was very few players in Austria. And I applied with them, but to be honest, I never got a reply. So I started in a very normal way as a wannabe lawyer, so a lawyer in training with one of the big law firms and so forth. And that was interesting on the one hand, because it was my first exposure, not to M&A business, which I, when I started, liked very much, but really to regulatory scenes. And in university and so forth, that was not something we ever discussed, right? And that was interesting, but I didn't follow it through in that sense. And what then happened, and this comes to the things you alluded to, I had one day got a call from Professor Blasonic, who was probably one of the top students of my father, but most importantly, one of his best friends. And they had met just a couple of weeks earlier, I guess. And my father mentioned that I'm really into venture capital. And at that time, they were starting a new venture fund or a venture investment house in Zurich. And basically, I got the chance to go there for 3 weeks and start something that was later called Uptake. And it was one of the first, I would say, Swiss private investment entities, which was originally targeting Swiss universities and many of the intellectual property ideas that came out of that. And eventually it did then invest in many other things as well. But that's kind of where and how I got into venture capital.
One of the first investments you made, if I remember correctly, was linked to something with digital cameras, like in the switch of the Kodak and Fuji's
Right.
becoming unrelevant. What was that?
So I mean that happened a bit before I joined, and it was at EPFL in Lausanne, the university, and Professor Kretzel, who is indeed not only one of the key inventors of solar cells, but also of digital camera. Well, not of digital cameras, but of digital photography. And indeed, ETech did invest in him and some of his ideas. And a couple of years later, only it really led, as you rightly say, to all of those big names which we grew up with, but most of the people out there won't even remember in reality. Polaroid and Fuji and Kodak and so forth, going from hundreds of millions of turnover and of employees to basically becoming extinct, right? So that is one of those moments, and there's many of them, that really, when I later then went back to university and studied that, defined that you're in this ongoing cycle of technology disruption, right? And this is where I and many others kind of saw it in real life.
You wrote this book, Uptake Revisited. I'm not sure if there's many people in the world that have read this so many times as I did. And I think I've also promoted it a lot of times because I think it's quite thin, right? But really smart, right? If you get it. The logic that you explained me, I think the first time we met, was that companies, when they're incumbents, don't understand what will disrupt them. So a Kodak would say, we're an image capturing company. And when the image capturing chip comes, they don't understand that they're actually in a chemistry company. Fuji did. They're today, again, in chemistry, right? But away from producing film. Can you explain a little bit this concept of these interlinked S-curves?
Sure. Well, I think we have to take a step before Uptake Revisited. And there was the first book I co-wrote at the time that was called Making Money Out of Technology. And I think working with ETech, first of all, was a dream come true. But I think the really almost unbelievable thing that happened to me is I got to work with people like Gerhard Blasonic and Richard Artley, who was the CTO. And Richard was just, I don't know if you met him when you were in Zurich, but he was, I would say, almost a genius, right? In the way he thought about models. And he was the one who introduced me to most of the S-curves and even the Harvard bell curve and so forth. And as you rightly put it, actually, it's a little bit different. I think in reality, those companies say, no, we are a chemical producer. And then you have to take a step back and say, no, you're an image capturing producer, either through chemistry or whatever, so to get them away from the driving technology and whichever it then ends up with. And Uptake Revisited was not really meant as a book, but when I was at ETech, I did my MBA, and it was kind of the master thesis of the MBA, which then got upgraded into the second book. And there I rightly brought together all of those models, and over the next books, I got to develop them even further.
I obviously always get this wrong so that you can explain this right, with the two different sides, incumbent and the new companies. Right. Now, you had learned a lot about disruption. You had been quite successful, right, in this early career in venture capital, and then still decided to become a lawyer and built this global network of law firms, and somehow ended up in blockchain. How did that happen?
Well, you're very nice again by saying that I kind of planned that, which obviously is not true. So what happened is when we were raising for the third fund for ETech, which was meant to be called MTech, because we were really having a lot of success in the medical devices space. So we wanted to do a fund that was more focused on that. And obviously also the idea was that I would be leading or co-leading that fund. And we started to fundraise in 2007, right? So you know what 2007 was. That was obviously when the last financial crisis kind of really got big and came over to Europe. So
today we can see the start of the poly crisis, right?
Yes.
With Lehman and whatnot.
Exactly.
The blowout of the sub-sovereign crisis. Yeah.
So it was definitely not a good time to raise any funds. And it also meant that at some point I had to find a new job because the GPs, so to say, of ETech decided not to do a third fund. And they said, well, you're young enough, you will definitely find a new job. And at the time it was, and I really tried, but really, really impossible to find anything in the financial services space. So I actually had to do the one thing I never wanted to do. So it means go back to what I originally trained in, which was law. And the other thing was I had to go to where I never, ever wanted to work. And there was a Big Four company. And originally I started with Deloitte. And after 1 year, I was hired by PwC, which in Switzerland is the number one company, right? So
I think
obviously,
also globally.
I think global is number two. Deloitte is bigger. But whatever, we're talking big numbers, right? So
I'm friends with the PwC guys here. Let's say they're equal.
they're equal, yeah. I mean, the people are all the same. They just move around between the companies. So I'm not making a big distinction between them. But anyway, so I got lucky because at the time, it was headed by Dieter Wirth, who was is an amazing person. And he saw the opportunity because I said in the development of the regulation, it will also hit Switzerland. And Switzerland not being a part of the EU and other regional conglomerates and organizations, they would have to find a way to somehow deal with that. And with the US, it was very clear because the big banks had arranged themselves and taken over essentially many of the regulations factually. So with the EU, it was clear that a lot of the incoming regulation, like the Alternative Investment Fund Managers Directive and others, they would take over one way or the other. And that would mean at heart that many would have to be regulated, and that would also change the tax reality for them. And Dieter Wirth was a lawyer himself, or is a lawyer himself, but he also led the big tax part. So he saw that there was a lot of opportunity coming in for PwC by basically building A, a practice, and B, a network around that. And that is what I eventually ended up helping him with, yeah.
And Switzerland, now known as the Crypto Valley, took off quite early in blockchain. I think it was the first country in the world that introduced a regulation on blockchain. When was that? And how did you get involved in this?
Right. So obviously your question before, which I didn't fully answer, was the blockchain part. And Switzerland never had a real regulation. It had an absence of regulation, right? That's what also made it very attractive for many people because a lot of, in particular, the early followers of Bitcoin or the first altcoins or whatever you want to call them, like Ethereum and the ones that came thereafter, were afraid of not knowing whether or not they're regulated. And they were looking at many countries on this planet, and Switzerland was one of them. And at some point they came. And I don't think I know. I had been introduced to them via a friend from San Francisco and got to talk to them, got to meet them, but I didn't get to work for them, right? Because PwC was a little concerned that it would be a high risk, should we say, right? Because back then, crypto as the first application of blockchain technology was kind of considered a little murky. So, you have to think about it like any starting technology. So there was a lot of innovators and a lot of crazy tech people in there, not like today when it's becoming more and more industrial and so forth. So obviously for somebody like PwC or any Big Four, that was more scary than anything, right? Because they are, as they rightly put it, they are the keepers of the rules and the auditors of the rules and so forth. To really go into this new murky land was a little strange. So initially they didn't go in there, but a year or so later, indeed we became very active and more or less across the service firms or across the service parts of the firm, but in particular in Switzerland in the regulatory side. So we got to advise many on their ICOs and so forth. And I would say that happened between 2016 and 2018. And so around, I would say middle of 2018, it changed the way again because many of the then big players went to Cayman and BVI. And so where originally Switzerland had a very, very big share, it then went down to a rather slow one, a rather small one.
Now, you had been always involved with radical changes in technologies. As a lawyer, had been involved early with blockchain, as you just explained. And then you had always been in contact with radical musicians, right? A big fan of rock. I remember this very cool design of your book, New Suits, which I highly recommend reading, on the future of the law practice, right, on the technology side. But here there was, I think it was Billy Morrison, right, where you had on the cover, or somehow a friend of yours. How is the linkage with tech, music, disruption? I never got this.
Well, there isn't one really. I think it's just my passion for it. But I mean, I think it was my second last book or so, New Suits, or third last one, which we wrote in 2019, and it was quite successful, and was also quite successful, as you rightly put it, because of the packaging. And back then, I got Billy Morrison, who's the guitar, or one of the guitar players for Billy Idol, to design the cover of it. And I also had a certain guitar player who was with Red Hot Chili Peppers and others to put a one sentence on the cover, and it was kind of radical and cool and so forth, which was the idea, because we were talking, as you rightly say, about the future of an industry, and one where I strongly thought that it will be changing dramatically with things like artificial intelligence and blockchain and other things coming to the table and starting to play out. And did I get it right? When I look at it now, a couple of years later, no, we heavily underestimated it, but still, back then it was kind of a new approach and a new way of doing it.
What was the underestimation? Did you think that machine learning back then, today LLMs, or let's say not character interpretation, everybody says AI, I tend to say character interpretation, because AI for me is still another step elevated ahead. But what was the underestimation? Was it that you thought AI will not take off this fast?
Well, AI was mentioned, so if you turn around the book, there is some keywords there, and AI is one of them. So we've seen it, but it was more in terms of machine learning and the like. So not as we understand it now today after, I mean, it's been around for many years, but with ChatGPT and so forth, it became really big and really fast. And that was not on the screen back then in 2019. But we were indeed thinking about some of the movements, and you can read it in the book, which was written by many authors and professors and practitioners from around the world. And we had some thoughts, and I think 2 or 3 of the key ones were that, like, if you set up a company today, the last thing you really need is a lawyer, right? You can do this heavily by using certain AIs and so forth. And you then need a lawyer to look over it or to do special arrangements or something new, but the pure foundation, no. So that was seen as a change, like the introduction of the internet, which kind of brought a global world closer together and so forth. So from a purely local player, if you were half smart, you became integrated in networks very early. So those kinds of developments we've seen. And we also talked about the development of organizations, which come historically from those pyramid structures, and then they go to rockets, and in the future they're more networks, right? So we developed we thought about ideas like that in the future you don't need to work for one company, but if you're really good on a certain subject, you could basically build your own global network working on certain connected platforms and the like, right? But I think the idea of the book was not to present solutions, it's just to get people thinking, right? Point them in certain directions, and that was the interesting bit.
Get involved in the tech that might change your future. Have the friends of yours, the musicians, had also on the radar that tech is affecting them? I mean, today I'm a big fan of Suno. I don't know if you know Suno. Great application where you can prompt and create music. Was this something they were interested in, or were they just really friends, passion, sharing with you, and just experimenting in terms of creativity?
Yes and no. So what started is many of those players and so-called big names from the music industry were friends of mine. And when I went to LA, or when they came over doing concerts, we did interviews with them and streamed it out. And the idea was always about innovation as such, and to basically say, when you come in as a new band, a new singer-songwriter, bringing a new idea to market, how do you become successful, right? So this was not so much about technology, but about the uniqueness of whatever they are doing. And then later, some of them were a bit more open and looked into the technology, but that was very few, right? And in particular, who took up some of the elements that you're referencing to. Some even went into the blockchain area and so forth. I remember Matt Sorum from Guns N' Roses, who was a rather early not sure if he was an adopter, but close to some networks doing that. Then I think he's the second guitar player after that Daisies, but in reality, he's one of the richest people on this planet. So on the one hand, he's going on tours with his amazing band, and on the other hand, he's basically managing his family office. And he's flying around with a plane which he actually owns, right? And he obviously is also very open to technology, and he knows that. So I think it's not that in general you could say that it's been like that, but some of the more open-minded ones indeed were at least paying attention to that.
What I'm curious is now with your family office and exelixis, I hope I said that right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exponential technologies, circular economy, longevity. You do a lot of things, again, in the investment space, right? Now, independent for yourself, I would say family and friends, right? What's the topic here and why are you doing this? How do you foresee the future? Like, where does all this lead?
So I've been working with PwC for 13 years, and if I throw in the Deloitte time, then there was 14, 15 years. That was quite unbelievable, really, and was probably way longer than anybody thought. And I probably should have left it a bit earlier, but I didn't because, you get promoted and you get the benefits of doing new stuff in different setups. But I really did it because I lost my father very unexpectedly, and then a year later, also my mother. And that also led to a lot of thinking what I want to do for the next couple of years of my life. And it really came back to what I did before, the e-tech and related things. So really look at the world today and look at some of the big changes and how I can, in a little way, participate in that and help it grow. And I got very lucky because over the years I built a number of friendships, and they didn't actually know each other, but two friends of mine whom I then introduced to each other and me, we started and did exelixis together. And we really said we want to invest in what we really believe in. So it's not like the venture fund or whatever. It's just our belief. And if it's interesting for the world or for the people, they will join us anyway. And we've done 15 investments now. And I would say from the third or so on, we've been approached by other people. Most of them are from the more ultra net worth space and who wanted to participate in things like Ida Genève, the watch brand, or one of the later ones, Bitcoin Swiss, and so forth.
And again, interest also from California, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know if you're referring to a certain actor. Well, he didn't go through us, but he invested directly in Ida Genève, Leonardo DiCaprio, yes. And I mean, it can be anybody, right, who is open to something. But what we defined, and we can get into this in a second, is the three areas that we all agreed on that we want to put some money behind. On the one hand, exponential technologies, and that is everything from artificial intelligence to blockchain, to all kinds of internet services and so forth. And then also circular economy, which was something I grew very close to because building sustainability is one of the themes in PwC, basically led to circularity being kind of circularity plus, right? And then on the third level, but I've become very concerned with using the very term of longevity or whatever. So it's not that we are generally investing there, but when it comes to the mechanics behind it, the systems, data about women, which is not in the systems as much as it should be, and so forth. So there were the three buckets that we started to invest in.
Okay. And now if you combine everything you know and these international friendships, where do you think are we heading in the next 10 years? Like if you need to make 3 moonshot predictions, what would they be?
I don't know.
Let's say Bitcoin price in 10 years.
I don't know.
0 or a gazillion?
I mean, Bitcoin, I think if we look into the blockchain application or blockchain as a technology and its application, Bitcoin was amazing when it was started, right? I got that one because I got the white paper, I think very early in Europe. I read it, never understood it, but I understood it when I walked onto Paradeplatz, because at that time there was people standing there and shouting and not being happy with the banks, with the asset managers and so forth. But if you went a few meters further, there was the Apple store, right? And when they brought a new computer to their shop, people were queuing around the building to get that computer. So you saw that difference, how people were almost hating the human business kind, and on the other hand, they were really into technology. So when the blockchain idea basically came as, on the one hand, a technology solution for a human problem, that sounded very interesting, right? And there was many, many interesting aspects, like it's not a national or regional system, it's a global network of miners and so forth. That I understood that this could be interesting. And this is also where I happily invested, because that was clear. With the altcoins, and we're still in the crypto application of blockchain technology and not others, altcoins are incredibly interesting as well. But if I bring out my cell phone right now, there's not really that many applications yet there. So I think we're predominant design there, and the changes will only happen. And whether they happen or not, we will see. So Bitcoin as a concept is still very interesting, but in terms of technology and so forth, there's some question marks around that. So I don't know if somebody will bring a better solution or whatever to basically then say it's 1 million or 10 million or whatever per coin. So I honestly don't know, but Bitcoin is a concept I like quite a bit. But I'm more interested in what we can do with the blockchain as a technology rather than the crypto application. So things like put all of your data on blockchain, and then you go into a pharmacy and say, look, I want to have something because my head is hurting me today, and all of my medical data is on there, maybe also that of my parents, maybe even the people beyond that, so they know very clearly what it is you need, especially if you tell them that yesterday you probably drank 1 or 2 glasses too many, and you get one tablet and it's gone. But that means that you change everything for the pharma industry and so forth. So I think that is the underlying potential, and especially when you couple it with other exponential technologies and so forth, that I'm really interested in. But to your question, what I think will change, first of all, I think the world changes in a way we've never seen before, right? If you think how we grew up, and if you compare that how our parents grew up and how our grandparents grew up, so you were living in very centralized worlds, and people were working in typically structures of a triangular nature and so forth. For us, it was already a little difficult, or a little different, because we were starting to use the internet, we were starting to use the computer and so forth. Now, if I go one step further, and if I look at my students at the university, right? For example, here in Vienna, where I've been teaching yesterday and I will be teaching today, they're totally different. I mean, they're working globally from day one. They're traveling globally to bits and pieces of the world where I haven't even been, and so forth. So I think in terms of corporate structures, we will go not only from the triangular situations to rockets, but we will go way beyond that. So things like we've seen in the crypto space and so forth. And that is a huge chance if you want to really, really, really follow that through. So that would be my number one. The other thing is technology, right? Exponential technologies, where it comes down to more than one which you need to combine. So it's not about only blockchain, but if you say blockchain and the AI, since we've been talking about the two, this is where it becomes really interesting. And just one example on this one, and stop me if I go too far, was I basically sold most of my crypto holdings a couple of weeks ago, just before it went all down. And honestly, I would never personally have done that because I'm a human being, and I was like, no. As I once said, I will only sell at 100,000 Swiss francs, right? And I never managed to go there. It will at some point, but back then, I always had this thing in my heart that would have stopped me. But I've been basically bombarded with messages from various LLMs, which I basically, breaking it down, just said, tell me when I need to sell, right? And they said, now. And then I sold at 93,000 Swiss francs rather than the 99 or whatever it went to. So not at the highest point, but definitely at a point that was way higher than what I usually as a human being would have sold them.
Good job. I hope you're buying back in.
Absolutely.
In order to wrap things up a bit, because we have to be time cautious, I allow myself to summarize a bit. I'm sure that Web3 applications with high value include Teneo protocol, as we're sitting on a board in a foundation in Switzerland covering this. I think a brilliant solution for real-time data in AI, and definitely a monetization potential that's beyond many other protocols. With regards to Bitcoin and whatnot, as speculative assets, it's always great when markets go down. It's a good chance to buy in. No investment advice, but I think we both align that this game is not over. It has not really started yet. It's a bit like the internet in the late 90s, we would say, from market adoption side. In terms of exponential technology, since we have seen so many innovation cycles, I think we also agree that there is much more to come and speed will only pick up. So going full time is actually quite smart, and to have a balance in life and balance this out with a bit more boring businesses on the side also makes a lot of sense. If you're keen to get to know Günther, I'm 100% sure he will be at World Venture Forum. You might want to apply for that as well. I'm very much looking forward to see you again, my friends. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. It was great having you guys. Great having you, Günther.
Thank you.
And I hereby say goodbye. See you next time.
Let's talk about tech. Let's talk about tech, baby. Let's talk about your IP. Let's talk about steel, baby. Let's talk about